Hello, everyone. I'm Charlie, and welcome back to another Premier League DFS DraftKings Slate breakdown. Back after the long international break, I'm happy to get back into the swing of things. Like it's a pretty big slate, one, two, three, four, five gamer. Maybe my biggest favorite, which you don't say very often. It's after that long international break, so we have teams swapping set pieces at times, which makes me a little nervous. Also, Champions League looming, so teams like Man United and who else is in it? Aston Villa. I think those are the only two. Like, could see some rotation there or early subs. So it's kind of a pretty multifaceted slate. So lots to break down. And in terms of projected lineups and set pieces for Southampton in this team, I feel like it should be Dibbling and Sugawara. There's a chance we see like Cornet in though, and he alpha Dibbling in the past, but like that's I wouldn't even say a set thing anymore. Like for Leicester, they had zero set pieces last game. Harry Winks is kind of seems to dropped out of favor. And the first game without him, they didn't have any set pieces. These corners, I know they had a couple of free kicks that Buonanotte took, so he's probably the most likely candidate to take something. Chance he splits with like an Ayu or Mavididi though, or maybe even he just takes everything himself. We're just not really sure what they end up doing. Fulham and Villa, Pereira Monopoly. That's one thing I don't really see ever changing. And for Aston Villa, who are a tough to predict set piece team at the best of times, and now after an international break, it's going to be a mess. Tielemans should have something. Like he's the most likely guy, but like Digne could split, McGinn can split. I've seen him go McGinn, Digne split, in swinger, out swinger. It's just Bailey too could take something. They're just a mess. And like for me in cash, at least they're just a hard avoid considering Champions League is coming and just how uncertain their set pieces are at the best of times. For GVP, though, of course, always can have a sprinkle. If switch, it should be mostly Leaf Davis, maybe Calvin Phillips splits, maybe Jack Clark splits, but Leaf Davis will take when he feels like it. Don't think he'll have like a full monopoly like he used to, but or maybe it's like 75% I could see him taking. And for Everton in this lineup, it should be a McNeil monopoly. If we see Lindstrom in, though, he'd split. Man United and Brentford. Christian Eriksen's kind of the main set piece guy now. We saw like a Diallo Ericsson split. We've seen Bruno Alpha or like them both take at the same time at times. But now Ericsson's kind of the main guy. It's like Denmark Ericsson that we saw over international break where he just takes everything. Ahmad will maybe take like a couple of one-offs or just change of pace set pieces, but Ericsson's just like the main guy now. Like if I was to put a number on it, like 90%, I'd say. For Brentford, in this team, it should be Mbuemo and Damsgaard split. I'm kicking myself for not playing Damsgaard whatever week it was where I thought he'd have set pieces, ended up taking. Just didn't play me like 2 assists, like 9 crosses. I think he's in play even here against Man United. Same with Mbuemo. Like, despite Man United being the biggest favorites on the site, they're only minus like 130. We know how they play. Like, they almost prefer to sit on the counter attack than dominate games, which gives a lot more opportunity for floor points for Brentford. So Damsgaard and Mbuemo, I think they're both in play, both interesting. If Carvalho is in, I imagine he'll end up having sets over Damsgaard, but is the guy who will have a share for sure. Newcastle, Brighton, it's just been announced Trippier's probably out for like early November, like a month, they said potentially. Because of that, I expect it to go back to being Gordon and Lewis Hall set pieces like it was when Trippier was out that last extended period. There's a chance that Tonali ends up taking something too. Newcastle's another team similar to Villa where since Trippier's been gone, they just don't have super concrete sets. Even when Trippier was back, it wasn't that concrete. Like all should have something as left-footed option. I think Gordon will still have something. Tonali, I think, probably is the man looking in, but I could see him just taking one or two, like he does for Italy, despite not being a primary set piece taker in that situation either. Now for Brighton, in this team, it should be Hinchelwood and Minte splitting. We could see Estupinian, which would really muddy things. Like we've seen Minte and Estupinian switch priority like crazy. Last game, Estupinian came in off the bench for Brighton. I don't think he took a thing despite having Monopoly just the game before that. I really hope we don't see him. Like, just it'd make life a lot easier since we'll get to prices in a little bit, but I know Minte is way down there. And Chilwood, I'm just not super interested in no matter what. It's just more whether Estupinian or a Minte ends up with the likely share. And prices. Gordon's the most expensive. With no Trippier, I think he immediately comes in play. Technically the second best matchup. I know not by crazy margins, but still a minus favorite nonetheless. He's got a lot of upside. Probably Newcastle's hottest attacker right now. I know he missed that pen against Everton, but he still played well. 11 floor, scored against Man City the game before that. So Anthony Gordon, I like him a lot. He's kind of picked up the slack when Ishak has been out. With them together, it changes his role a little bit. He's not going to be like a false nine that he's played at times. Still don't think that diminishes his upside at all. Like I could see him maybe even improving now that he's got someone to work off of, like Ishak not playing out of position anymore. So Gordon, I think super in play. Ollie Watkins, like I said, Bill, I'm just not super interested in for cash at least. For GPP, sure, throw a little bit in there, but even then, I wouldn't go crazy overweight there just because of the way where Villa are. I'm likely taking my chances on there and having very minimal exposure to them. Now, Dwight McNeil. Him and Gordon are kind of the two big payouts I'm looking at. I don't know which one I'm going to commit to yet. McNeil's the traditional kind of DFS friendly option, takes tons of crosses, takes corners, decent floor, and even added a little bit of upside to that lately. I just don't think he has quite as much upside as Gordon. Probably not as good of a matchup either. That Newcastle Brighton game can end up like 3-2. Wouldn't surprise me in the slightest. I could definitely see Ipswich Everton being maybe a little bit more cagey. Although never know that if like if an early goal happens there, that game could open up as well. So they're both in play for sure. Ishak is questionable. Interesting. It's interesting that FootMob had him in projected. Garnacho, I think, is going to not be in the squad, or at least not start. John Duran, just they shouldn't start him anyway, just because he's the best as a super sub. Raul Jimenez just tore apart the USA. I like that for GPP. For cash, like I said, guys I'm mainly looking at in this range are McNeil and Gordon. Because of that, makes most of these other kind of mid-range guys to me pretty irrelevant. Although Adama Traore, I don't mind. Decent floor. He's okay. But then these other guys, just not really interested in. Jack Clark, if there's no Calvin Phillips, should split for sure if that's the case. I know he was pretty poor against West Ham, but that was away. We've seen Ipswich be slightly more productive at home, needing that home crowd behind them. They played pretty well against Aston Villa. Jack Clark had some nice numbers on his own. So probably not in cash, but I like him GPP. Cam Archer. Nah. Okay. Now Mavadidi and Jordan Ayew. Mavadidi is, I think, who would be the most likely to split with Buonanotte. I ended up playing him in cash last week. Did not do great, but he's definitely still a not bad play here. Southampton is definitely an easier match than Bournemouth. And if he ends up with set pieces, that's a steal for 5,500. Rashford. I think this will be a super popular play, even in cash. He's just too cheap. I know he's just been super bad, but biggest favorite on the slate. If Garnacho doesn't end up on the bench, gets a bigger chance of Rashford going 90 rather than getting subbed at 60 like he has been. I know he's been just off the boil, but he just got left out of that England squad. I'm sure he's got a chip on his shoulder. And this is definitely a potential for a bounce back game here, and can definitely do worse for that cheap of a price at 5,400. All right, dog wants attention. But okay, we'll get dog on stream as I go through these prices here. Jamie Vardy, I think, is an all right GPP play as well. Just seems to be ageless. Like for that cheap, I think that's a fine play. Now, Yakubu Minte, 3,900. That is so cheap. If Estupinian is not playing, I think that's an immediate, just awesome play. Just because likely set pieces, for that cheap in a high goal total game. I think there's a lot of kind of things going in Minte's favor. Didn't have, I mean, he did have crazy numbers since he scored that goal. Didn't have a crazy floor last game, but even then, I think Minte is a fantastic play here. Is there any other forwards I want to talk about? All right, off. Not really. Midfielders, Bruno Fernandez is the most expensive. If there's Eriksson in, I'm just not a huge fan, frankly. He just has not had great numbers all season. Like, sure, he might somehow push his way to 7 or something, but for 10K, you're not happy with a 7. You need goal contributions. He's not been offering that lately, and without set pieces, he doesn't have that really nice floor. So because of that, Bruno's probably a fade for me in cash if Ericsson's in. Mbuemo, I think he's more tempting than Bruno. He's got that upside. I know that they keep scoring that goal like 30 seconds in every game. I don't expect that to happen every time for Brentford, but even then, Mbuemo's had a good floor. It's not as bad of a matchup as I think it is on paper against Man United away. So Mbuemo, I think, is super in play here. Pereira, I don't think he has the upside, but got that goal against Man City to be fair. So maybe he has a little bit more upside than I'm giving him credit for. But he's been getting subbed quite a bit. Aston Villa's a tough matchup despite them probably worrying more about Champions League. So I don't mind Pereira. I just don't love it. 7K is not really much of a bargain either. Anyone else here, like Tielemans, I'm just not interested in Villa that much, like I said. Carvalho, don't mind him. I don't know if what he does with Damsgaard is the issue there. I think they scored off of a Damsgaard corner. So there's a chance that Damsgaard maybe ends up alphaing. We just don't know yet. What a note I'm pretty interested in. He just has such a high ceiling because he could just end up being like a monopoly guy. 20 points last game, didn't even end up having a cross. Just shows that he could definitely done way better than this if they just somehow gotten like 4 or 5 corners, or like a couple more free kick set pieces that he could have crossed. So Buenanote, I'm interested in. Tonali, there's no Gordon somehow. Like if there's like a scratch or something. I don't think that's bad. And Ciso just hasn't been playing, but I don't mind that either, frankly. Ericsson. I'm pretty interested in Christian Ericsson. Or pseudo monopoly, we'll say, on the biggest favorite. I know they were poor against Aston Villa. I don't think Brentford are going to kind of play like Aston Villa did, where they just try to dominate possession. I think they'll try to potentially make it more of a track meet, make the game more end to end, which could potentially hurt Ericsson. He's just not the most mobile anymore. But that just also means Man United will be up the field more, so more chance of drawing set pieces. And even then, like Ericsson still had 5 crosses in a game that Man United, frankly, were happy to hold on for a draw for. And like he's been a 90-minute player lately. So Ericsson, I'm pretty interested in. Um, Everyone else, Damsgaard, I don't think is bad for that cheap. Dibbling, I don't think is bad for that cheap. Lindstrom, I don't think is bad for that cheap. Shada, it seems like a GPP play to me for 4K. Same with John McGinn, despite me not loving Aston Villa. Harry Winks, if he's in, don't think is bad at 3K. Just don't expect a ton from him there. You're just kind of using him to play other pieces at that price. Defenders, the big name is Leif Davis here with Trippier injured. I'm probably playing. I know he hasn't dropped crazy numbers, but it's just solid performance. And in cash, you don't really need to do anything slate breaking. If you're happy with the 10, you just don't want a guy dropping like a 2 on you or busting. And at 6K, like that's safe points to me. So I'll probably play Leif Davis in cash, especially with no Trippier. That's a lot less competition for him. Denier, potential sets, but like I said, Villa not for me here. Sugawara, don't mind him. He's a little pricey. Estupinian, if he's in, real tough one if him and Minte are both in. If no Minte, I think that makes Estupinian a little bit more appealing. I know he was not great against Chelsea. What did he drop? 6? Not that good against Tottenham, only a 3, but Tottenham's a tough matchup away considering how much possession they usually keep. So I don't mind him. And then after that, like I always prefer set takers if I'm paying up at D. Like a Lewis Hall, I think is probably the best of the mid range. That is a set taker for a little bit cheaper than your Estupinian and Leaf Davis. And after that, I'm probably looking at punts. Like we saw that Pinnock goal. That those are GP center backs are always GPP winning players. Just they can get 12 points for 2,500 is just insane return as always. It's not likely to happen, but when it does, that's a big boom. So yeah, fine with any of these cheap guys if they make the rest of the build work. You never know. Lindelof, if he's a left back, I can see some appeal, although he's been pretty god awful and only played 45 all season. But as a punt, I think that's fine. Same with like a Tarkowski, just whatever on him. And for goalie, as always, super variance based. Probably whoever fits. Try to correlate in GPP. And then I think someone asked me after last video a couple weeks ago. I'm just remembering it now. Something about game stacking, like that Brentford game. I think was crazy, like 3-2, and that's always a viable GPP strategy. Look at games with high goal totals, like that Brentford game was. But you can always do a little GPP stack. Like you do with like Brighton Newcastle, just play attackers on both sides. Make sure you don't play a goalkeeper in that game because you expect to be 3-3. Your goalkeeper's not going to get there if that's a scenario. So you try to play goalkeeper from the other game. Like GVP is all about game script, I feel like. Just imagine what could happen and build for that scenario and do that 10 times, 10 different scenarios. Or you could go about it a different way and build for the same scenario 10 times and different slight variations of that. I like that more in Showdown Classic. I tried to get a little bit more wild, but of course, I'll still kind of coalesce my builds around a handful of like guys, which is usually what the core is. Speaking of, Leaf Davis, number one. From here, it's tough. I'm probably going to go McNeil. Like, he's the safest kind of floor option. Then after that, the guy I'm really tempted by is Christian Eriksen. I could end up going Gordon over McNeil, but this is who I'm thinking right now. I might end up like cramming both of those guys. Like, that's still a doable build. Like, we saw a bunch of cheap set piece takers for 4K-ish for midfield. But I'm thinking I'm going that for a core. Eriksen, I just like the matchup and like his current role in that Man United team. So yeah, make sure you join the Discord to get latest cores latest cores in case I change anything. I also cover all these other smaller slates and showdowns. But yeah, guys, good luck this weekend, and I'll see you for the Champions League preview in a few days. Peace.